Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Jacqueline Bullock. I am the Director of Education and Visitor Services at the Lewis Museum. Uh, Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We are so very excited to be partnering with the Jewish Museum for this series. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Abe, a board member for the Jewish Museum.
Thank you, Jacqueline. I'm Abe Kronsberg, member of the Board of Trustees of the Jewish Museum of Maryland and a member of Hizkiah congregation. It is my pleasure this afternoon to introduce our speakers. As this series has developed, we have relied upon a small group to guide our planning process. I am especially pleased today that you will have an opportunity to hear from one of the key members of that group, Dr. Harriet Wims. Dr. Wims will be interviewed by Rabbi Joshua Grunberg, who has supported this series from its inception. Rabbi Joshua Grunberg is the senior rabbi of Hizkiah congregation. He earned his bachelor's degree in political science from the State University of New York, Binghamton, and was ordained by the Jewish Theological Seminary. Dr. Harriet E. Wims is a Maryland licensed clinical psychologist who specializes in providing compassion-infused assessments and therapies to children and families across the age span. She is currently a clinical assistant professor of psychology at Loyola University, Maryland, and is also the founder and clinical director of the Village Family Support Center of Baltimore. Dr. Wims was the recipient of the Maryland Psychological Association's 2018 Grady Dale Jr. Award for outstanding contributions to diversity in psychology. She is a rising Kohenet, completing her training at the Hebrew Priestess Institute, a Jewish ritual training program. She is chair of the Ritual Committee and a member of the board of Hinenu, Baltimore Justice Stiebel, and the founder of the Baltimore Jews of Color Community Chavruta. Rabbi Grunberg.
Abe, thank you so much. Being that this week is Thanksgiving, which I will tell you, I'll be honest with you, Harriet, is my favorite yontif, is Thanksgiving, because it's the only yontif where I'm not required to work, Harriet. So it is my favorite yontif. But being that this week is Thanksgiving, I want to begin today with just a quick note of hakarat hatov, of appreciation. Harriet, I can't even imagine each time that you come forward and are willing to talk about your experiences and your story, it has to be an emotional ride for you. It's not just something, Harriet, that you show up and do, at the flick of a finger. We are so appreciative, Harriet, that you are willing to share with us, that you are willing to give of yourself in such a generous way of spirit, of mind. And we hope that you know how much we appreciate you. And we hope that you know that we never take what you're doing for granted. It's not easy. And so we're just incredibly thankful to have you in our greater Baltimore Jewish community, Harriet. And we hope that you never feel like we are just piling on you, because we are so thirsty to learn and improve and get better. So thank you, Harriet, really. On behalf of the whole community, thank you.
So, see, you're going to make me cry just at the start.
I apologize.
And I so appreciate that. And I also have to say thank you back to the Jewish community. Thank you back to the communities that have welcomed me. Thank you, Rabbi Grunberg and Rabbi Debbie Wexler and Hizkiah for being my first Jewish home and for welcoming me so completely. So it's my pleasure. And this is the work that I do with Hashem.
Yeah.
And we often find ourselves in places wondering, wow, I'm a very shy person. I like to just sit in my office and talk to my clients. And all of a sudden, these circumstances are becoming available. And so I will say yes as often as I can.
Yeah. Great. Shall we jump in?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So, Harriet, for many of us, we are just beginning to understand what kind of unacceptable situation that Jews of color often go through when they walk into our normative Jewish communities.
Mhm.
Based on some of your own history, can you share a little bit with us about what your experience has been?
Mhm.
And maybe in the process, a little bit about yourself and why you are so willing to engage, Harriet, in this incredibly holy work. So I know that's an incredibly long question, but just kind of your experience, your story, and how that makes you so passionate about this incredible work that you're doing.
Yeah. As I've shared before, I've always felt that I had a Jewish soul. And I also felt when I was younger, until I was in my early 40s, actually, that I had to be white to be Jewish. And I happened to mention that once to a dear friend of mine who laughed because he thought I was joking, and then eventually brought me to Hizikamuna. And that led me to sitting down and having a conversation with Rabbi Wexler. And that led me to converting to Judaism and even having my adult bat mitzvah at Hizikamuna. And even part of that process had painful moments. I can remember the day that I had my conversion. Rabbi Wexler said, well, I'd like for you to have an aliyah. And I had no idea what that meant. All of a sudden, I'm on the bima, and people are singing to me and words that I don't quite understand. I'm completely overwhelmed. And anyone who's ever been, for folks who've never been to Hizikamuna, the auditorium, the place where we meet is tremendous. And so my knees are shaking, and I go outside to try to catch my breath. And a very nice lady, in a walker, walks over to me and says, oh, are you so-and-so's nurse? And for years and years, I thought that was the price I had to pay to be a part. And, there are lots of other moments like that, walking through soon after the horrible event that happened in Pittsburgh. And I'm walking through the door following a person who is not a person of color, and the guard lets that person through and then stops me and says, why are you here? I'm here for the, whatever it is. And recently I started to realize a couple of things. One, that's not a price I have to pay. And it's not a price that anyone should have to pay, right? It is our job to welcome the stranger. And it's also double-edged, because please don't over-welcome me, because I also don't want to be your token. And so, say hi like you would say hi
Right.
to anyone, but and also don't
assume I don't know where you are
No,
in the door
right.
just because,
That's
right? Like,
exactly.
and let's remember at least half of the other people don't know where we are at the same time.
Exactly. And, also just don't be too nice. Like, don't come up to me and say, so you're Jewish. Tell me about that.
Right.
Because that might just not be your business.
Right. Or because you're a Jew of color, you must have some spectacular story.
So exotic.
Right.
And so, it's interesting, because I think a lot of folks are at a point where they are darned if they do and darned if they don't. Right? They feel like, well, I don't know what to do. I'm supposed to be welcoming. I'm supposed to be kind. I would show anybody where we are in the Siddur, but maybe you wouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I would give that. I would give that almost advice, that if you were looking at a person in your shul and they're new to your shul, how might you interact with them if they are a white-skinned Jew? And would you interact in the same way if it is a Jew, if that person is a Jew of color? I remember when I was shul hopping before I came to Hizikamuna, and I walked into a shul, very kind people, but probably before I got to my seat, 15 people had stopped me to say hello. And I didn't go to that shul. One of the things I loved about Friday night services at Hizikamuna is I knew where my seat was. I knew the folks around me. I knew who I was going to hug. And there weren't people who treated me like an anomaly. Right. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Which actually is a great sort of segue, because I think a lot of times, Harriet, there's a little bit of a disconnect. And that is, you have people who belong to communities, that Jewish communities, that do a really good job of championing the right values, right, Harriet? These are good communities where, you know, their money where their mouth is. There's good people. And yet, there are Jews of color who will walk into those communities and have horrifying experiences, right? And so what happens is, right, there's a disconnect because we're almost taken aback and we're thinking to ourselves, no, wait a second. We've built these welcoming, incredible communities. This is not who we are. And yet, when we're sort of forced to take a step back, we have to sort of confront the fact that that is who we are. So my question is, can you speak a little bit to that disconnect? You started, and how have you worked in your history to bridge that disconnect? Like, how have you worked with allies who have helped to kind of fill that void with something that we can grow with, as opposed to something that's tearing us down?
Right. That's a complex question, and it's a good one. So yes, there is a disconnect. The psychologist in me brings up the idea of cognitive dissonance, that we just can't.
Festinger, Leon Festinger, right?
Right, exactly. We can't sit with something that's uncomfortable with us, because it's going to cause us to have to shift our mindset. And so I think that there are a lot of communities that are very well-meaning, that are living by their values. We had a playback theater performance last week.
Yeah.
And when I thought about bringing that to Baltimore and figured out the cost of it, I thought, I'll never have that much money. And 10 shuls and organizations came forward and donated money to make that event happen. And those same organizations some of them might not realize that there is an overall challenge that's also happening, right? Where is the Jewish leadership? Where's the Jews of color leadership in X organization, Y congregation, Z shul? Why is it that if Alana Kaufman said that, you know, about 20% of the folks in your congregations, when you look out, should be people of color. Now, you know, we don't always know that it's a person of color, right? Because, but if that's not happening in your organization, you might ask yourselves why. Right. Why is that happening? Where have
maybe, as opposed to the notion, which I think, I'm sorry to interrupt, like, I think we've told ourselves as Jewish institutions, oh, there's just not Jews of color around us. That's why they're not sitting in our pews.
Right.
As opposed to us sort of actively looking and quantifying, right, what does it mean to be welcoming? And, right, in that same sort of breath, how are we as communities we making up who we are, so that when a somebody who's a Jew of color walks in, they're not the only one and everybody rushes towards them because it's such an anomaly that it's like, oh my God, let's go be welcoming.
Right. And so I think part of that starts with, you know, I'm a child of the 60s. So it starts with consciousness raising, which has been happening. However, that's just a first step. You may read a book or an article, you may listen to a blog, but that's just the very, very beginning. Because if you look around and you aren't seeing people who might be considered the stranger in your organizations, be it people of color, be it LGBTQ folks, whatever, multi-faith families, if we're not seeing that, then we have to start shifting the institutions so that they can open the doors in that way. I was recently having a conversation with someone about Hinenu, and I can remember the day that I got an email from Rabbi Wexler who said, I hear you're doing amazing things at Hinenu, and that's wonderful. She knew that I was finding a second home, which is what we do, right? We let people fly. It's developmentally appropriate. And I was saying that one of the interesting things about Hinenu is that sometimes I look around and I see a room full of people who perhaps had been seen as the stranger. And yet in that shared space, there is home. So it goes beyond just reading the books. It goes beyond just writing down the values. When I joined Hizikamuna, Rabbi Ariana Katz said, you know, you're a rising Kohenet. And I still wanted, you know, to sit in the back and be quiet. And she said to me, why don't you bring your drum next service? Oh, as a rising Kohenet, would you like to offer something? Or, you know, what about chairing this committee?
Mm-hmm.
That's where we bridge the gap.
Yeah.
And that I'm not the only one. But how do we, and doing that difficult internal work of, how can I admit that change needs to come?
Mm-hmm.
And then how can I and we make that change come to fruition?
And it's so interesting to hear you talk about dissonance, cognitive dissonance, because I think in America today, we're like swimming in the cognitive dissonance. It's blue-red. It's right. I mean, on so many sort of, we've created all of these sort of binary entities, right? Where if it's not me, it's other. And the problem is with other, so I don't need to look within to what I'm doing because other is the problem, and so I'm free.
Right, exactly. And it's a, you know, that's brave space to actually be able to do that. And please excuse my little dog that might pop onto the screen. I'm feeding her challah off camera so that she won't bark at me, but she's now trying to get a little closer.
Harriet, as you and I have shared, in the Zoom world, you know, like short of the weird uncle showing up in underwear, we're okay. So we'll just,
Yeah.
you know, I wanted to follow up on something that you said, Harriet, which is Jewish leadership, and I think especially clergy. We've struggled to see the experience of Jews of color in the mainstream world. We really have. Mm-hmm. Why do you think that is? Mm-hmm. And how could these very same leaders be a part of the solution going forward?
Mm-hmm. I actually, there's Aaron Tapper is coming.
Yes.
In a couple of weeks. And I was noticing a quote here. I'm going to read it to you.
And that book will be available to all of you. Just call the Hizikamuna office. We have it for your purchase. Sorry, couldn't resist.
So Tapper is explaining that by presenting images of Jews from around the world, the diaspora, that we reject the idea of Ashkenazi narratives as the only narratives. And even though there are few projects and a few books and, like I said, podcasts that suggest that all Jews are not white in Baltimore, maybe even in the United States. We have a very Ashkenazi normative way. And so, and yet, if we explore, for example, the Tanakh, the Torah, and the places from where our ancestors come, there definitely is ethnic, racial, skin color difference.
Right.
But we are all swimming in our own soup. So what I think is as people are becoming, more woke, as clergy are starting to engage in these conversations about how do we embrace Jews of color, and how do we elevate Jews of color? We, like I said before, we have to be willing to move beyond. I have a story I want to tell, if you don't mind.
Please.
So last summer before last, because this summer is almost like it didn't happen. The summer before last,
Yeah.
I was given a tremendous gift, and I was invited to go with my partner's family to Italy. And amazing. And so we wound up in Florence, and as we're traversing our way to where we were staying, I noticed a Star of David on a beautiful building. So I'm looking in the travel guide, and there's an amazing Jewish museum in Florence. And I'm talking about it on Facebook, and Rabbi Wechter is like, oh my gosh, the history of the Jews in Rome and the history of Jews in Florence. And I just, everything is just amazing. And so this one day I take my teenage son and I'm like, all right, today's the day. And so we get an Uber, and then we get a this, and then we get that. And we find this building, and it's covered with, all these bars. And there were 2 armed guards with guns, like, longer than my arm. And I'm like, I think this is the museum, but I don't know. I don't speak Italian. And then I do this whole thing. We have to put our backpacks in a thing. We have to be sprayed to see if we have any explosives. We get all the way into the gift shop where we can buy a headset and listen to a guide of the museum. And so I'm paying for the guide, and a guy looks over to me and says in English, what brings you to this museum? And I'm still trying to be nice. And I said, well, I'm Jewish. And he said, well, you don't say. And I'm not proud of what happened afterwards. We walked out, and I said very loudly, not under my breath, yeah, Harrison, they're everywhere. So he followed me.
Right.
And he said, I am here visiting. Are you? Yes. Where are you from? Where are you from? Like, who are you?
Right.
Why? Where are you from? Well, I'm from Baltimore. You don't say. I'm from Baltimore. Ah. And I think, I can see that you're from Baltimore, but I'm really riled up at that moment. And he says, well, where do you go to shul? And I said, I go to Hezgamuna, Hinenu, and he says, well, I go to blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to, say. That's what I need clergy to understand. That's what I need Jewish institutions to understand. That I traveled across the world, and I traveled across Italy to get to this beautiful, historic synagogue and museum.
And even there.
And if you aren't actively doing something that can make those experiences anomalies, then I'm not sure what to tell you. But that's why I keep speaking up.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that story. I'm sure that cannot be easy. Thank you.
Listening.
So I think this is actually a good a good sort of segue to sometimes amongst white Jews, there's a certain reticence to engage with Jews of color, afraid of saying the wrong thing, afraid of doing the wrong thing, right? It's sort of so. How do we partner on these things going forward so that we're creating fertile ground, we're breaking down walls, but we'll get to my next question, which talks about the sort of understandable exhaustion amongst Jews of color for having to deal with this constantly. But that's in a moment, Harriet. But I think I think there is a fear amongst the white Jewish world that they're gonna, say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing. And so how do we sort of help with that? If there's a way to help.
Right. And, you're hearing my story. And for every story, for me, there are hundreds and hundreds of people who it would be great for folks to be able to hear from. But
Yeah.
here I am. And so what I think is the first step is humility and honesty. So perhaps it starts with, I'd like to get to know you. And I, as a white-skinned Jew, I definitely don't want to say anything to you that could make you feel marginalized or tokenized. What's the best next step for us to move forward? And I will say, after I call it a lynching of George Floyd, I did have Jewish leaders. I had a lot of people who all of a sudden realized I was Black, which was interesting. All of these people started just coming out of the woodwork like, oh, how you doing? You must be really tired. Well, I'm 52 and I've been Black my whole life. So thanks for checking in. But there were also Jewish leaders who reached out to me and said, I would like to connect. I would like to build conversation with you, connection with you, mishpacha with you. And I wonder if that would be something that would be acceptable to you. And isn't that how we might approach anyone?
I was just about to say, it's amazing to me, Harriet, how much of a better place the world would be if the three things that you mentioned, if we all had a little bit more humility, a little bit more honesty, and we all took the time to actually engage in and build real relationships with people. Just those three elements, each of us a little bit more. We struggle. What can one person do? Just those three things, right? If we all sort of were guarding ourselves on those three things, imagine the impact.
And because of the work that I do, I even feel that there are times when those three things can save a life. And as Jews, isn't that our highest mitzvah?
Yeah, save a life, you save the world.
Exactly, or mitzvah, right? Exactly, to save a life.
Yeah.
And to create community for folks is to save a life.
Yeah. Getting back to something that we were saying, it is great that Hinenu is in our community, that Rabbi Ariana is in our community. But I can't help but also think that, as great as that is, when you said it was a place for a lot of the others, right, that has to be considered a systemic failure in our community, that so many people walked away from our institutions needing a place where they didn't have to feel so other.
So you're going to go right for that, aren't you?
Well, I mean, how do you know?
I even took a sip of water. So it's hard for me to say failure, because I don't think people fail. I
Okay.
think that individuals and systems, I think systems falter. At least I have to think that way.
Hmm.
And from every falter, there can be knowledge and growth. And so,
Maybe we call it falling short.
I can right. I can sit
Falling
with that.
tragically short, but still.
Okay. Well, the tragically, I don't know, but let's just say short, right? Because every year that's what we're supposed to do, is to figure out where we missed the mark and how do we make it right. And so, yes, if you are clergy, are you marrying interfaith families? Are you marrying queer folks? Are you cultivating laning skills so that individuals who are perhaps even newer to Judaism are able to stand on the bima and lane Torah and have that amazing experience?
And also, by the way, it dawns on me, Harriet, as you're saying it, that like the experience of getting up and reading Torah in a synagogue, like it shouldn't take this, but it is a statement of belonging on some level, right? Like, hey, I read Torah. I'm here. Like, I'm not if I'm reading Torah, I'm not that person you need to show the page to when I walk in. I can, and I've heard stories like that from people that I know who walk in, a congregant who walks into Chizuk Emunah and somebody shows her the page number, and then literally 3 minutes later, she gets up to read Torah and bangs it out, right, Harriet? I mean, knocks it out of the park. And that, right at this point, that person is sitting there like, oh, right? Like, I just went over there and told her what page we were on. And now later, she's going to be tutoring me in Torah reading. And right, but I think that's great. So let me ask you this one.
Can I tell you
Please.
one thing? So I, after my bat mitzvah, I went to Rabbi Wexler and I said, I want to become a rabbi. And she was so right. She was like, well, maybe you could use your psychology work, in the synagogue, because I was not meant to go back.
Because being a rabbi is not a good profession for any good Jewish boy or girl, Harriet.
But I found a program called Kohenet,
Yeah,
which has supported me in Jewish leadership, especially as a woman identified person. And it's through that program that a lot of my leadership skills, I keep feeling like an unintended leader, because I just love the one so much. I just love Judaism so much. I just want to, with my two hands, live my Jewish life. And so, yeah, I don't have to be a rabbi. One day, very soon, I hope, God willing, I will be an ordained Kohenet.
love it.
And I am reaching out saying, I'd like to be a Jewish leader. Who do I talk to? And then I talk to one person and they say, you should talk to this person, and let's talk. And I wish that didn't have to always be that interconnectedness.
Yeah.
I want for us to also start to create a web so that the next generation is able to walk into that web that leads to leadership. And so that it's not necessarily a novel experience for a community.
Are you gonna duchen when you become a Kohenet?
I maybe not.
All right.
I don't know.
All right.
There are lots of things that are
I know, but
unfolding.
if you decide someday that you want to do that, just promise that you'll at some point give us at Chizik a chance to have you come and duchen. Sorry everybody, duchen is the Leonard Nimoy Spock-like blessing of the people. Leonard Nimoy was a Kohen, in fact.
It's true.
Okay.
And so, yeah, we'll see. I don't know. I don't want to get kicked out. I don't want, I don't need anyone to.
I hear you.
Yeah.
So there is an understandable amount of exhaustion amongst Jews of color for constantly having to educate their white brothers and sisters.
Siblings.
And siblings, right? And siblings and teachers in school and clergy. I mean, and yet we need the breadth of that experience on some level, Harriet, to grow as a community. Because in a lot of ways, if we aren't cognizant of and don't recognize that experience, we can't move forward, because we're just sort of moving forward in a vacuum where we don't even know actually what we're repairing. Mm-hmm. So, and this one is specifically for our white Jews. Like, what suggestions do you have for white Jews who know they need an education, but don't want to pester their Black brothers and sisters and teachers, and don't want, Jews of color to constantly feel like they are that token Jew of color who has to answer every question about it for every person who asks?
Right. And I like that question, because, it's not even just Black Jews, it's Jews who identify as Asian, Jews who identify as Latinx, Jews,
it's
and multiracial. And
it's any Jew who's not white, essentially.
Right. I think that I hope and believe that more and more people are becoming aware, and that perhaps caucusing within yourselves, among yourselves, is a good place. I think that there are a few Jewish people of color who are continually being tapped to educate, but I would ask that while reaching out to national and international experts on this, once you've started to do your own work, why not reach out to your siblings who are right here, either your neighbor or the person who sits in that one seat every high holidays, or create this sort of experience.
Yeah.
And these kinds of experiences could have been happening for a while, and now can continue to happen. Wouldn't it be wonderful if every shul had an opportunity for there to be open conversation? Wouldn't it be wonderful if every person who attended an organization could have an opportunity to hear stories of pain, but also stories of triumph, stories of belonging, could learn to hear what's going well, and to be able to emulate that. And for me, I'm driven. So I don't know where the energy comes from, caffeine. But I'm driven, and there are groups of people who I am working with, Jews of color, who are as driven and as committed to opening up these dialogues. So first, do some education yourself from a place of self-compassion even. Admit that you do have biases. We all have biases. If one more person says to me, I don't see color, I'm gonna lose it. Because it's a lie. So let's
And
admit,
it's okay to see color. Like, it's not a
it is
bad thing to see it.
if you don't see color, you don't see me.
Right.
And that doesn't mean that the totality of who I am is the color of my skin. But when I walk down the street, that's what a lot of people see first. And that's, unfortunately, we have come to know, that's a way that a lot of people will automatically judge me.
Yeah.
So I guess that's another way that you could look at it, is start to be honest about your own biases,
Yeah.
our own biases.
Without being overly rabbinic, I think the spark, at least in part, comes from Torah. I mean, in other words, like, this is so rooted in Torah, what we're doing. This is rooted right in the most basic, Harriet, of our Jewish values. I mean, how many times in the Torah does it say, right, treat the stranger well because you know what it's like? I mean, you're tempted to say it says it too many times, and yet this is one of the basic core values of any Jewish community. And if it's not, the Jewish community is broken. So it's
Right.
This work is rooted in our earliest history, and it's marked when we're best at this work. It's marked the best times in our history.
That's right. And right, because you were once a stranger in a strange land. And that means that in a way we are all strangers.
Yes.
We are all searching. We are all in transition.
Yeah.
It's the human experience.
So somebody asked if you could explain what Hinenu is.
Sure. I was gonna try to find the description from the website.
Yeah.
Hinenu is an egalitarian Justice Stiebel, a little house that was created by a number of Jews in Baltimore. About 3 years ago, newly minted Rabbi Ariana Katz, had over 100 coffee dates with Jews in Baltimore, asking, what do you think Baltimore needs? She actually was thinking of many different cities where she might go and build a Justice Stiebel, and she decided to bring a little bit more love to Baltimore and gathered together. Oh yes, thank you to whoever dropped that link in the chat, and has gathered together a group of people. We are a DIY shul, and it's pretty powerful. One day we said, maybe we'll do Shavuot. And a week later, we said, what we're going to do is we're going to do Shavuot across the country. We're actually going to invite in sister shuls, and we're going to have an all night. Oh my goodness. What I think we'll do is offer 27 learning opportunities and 2 Havdalah. And that's what happens because we're building it together. We used to meet at Friends Meeting House when we met in person. However, we now are online through Macomb ET. And here's a perfect example. We have one paid employee who's paid 3/4 time. That's our rabbi. And everything else happens by committee and by the hands of our members. We have had, I think since the 2nd or 3rd week of quarantine, a daily morning minyan that's completely lay-led.
Wow.
Every weekday, every week that we've been in quarantine.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes, we like to say it takes a rabbi to ruin a congregation. No, I'm just kidding. But that's
not what I'm saying.
No, I know. And I would say that I think it is so important that we have a Hinenu in the community, that we have this model of Jewish community in Baltimore, where we are a little bit of a traditional community, perhaps, and to see that there are evolving ways of Jewish expression and evolving ways of Jewish gathering, I think it's a really incredible asset to the Baltimore Jewish community.
Yeah.
One of our listeners today asked the following question: how are children of color treated by their peers in synagogue and Hebrew school? Not necessarily talking about very young children who might be less likely to see color.
Well, I'm hoping that my sister, I'm owning her as my sister, Tikva, is here. And with her permission, I can share a story that she shared last week during our playback theater program, which is she told a story of her 3-year-old coming home from Jewish day school with a scratch and having been told that they weren't allowed, they weren't liked because their skin was brown. And then the following day, the child was told that they didn't belong in shul because they had brown skin. And after that event, so this is a 3-year-old. So after that event, I was in my home with my family, and one of my family members was absolutely incensed and was saying, you know, a grown-up had to teach that for a 3-year-old to feel like it was okay. Just absolutely beside themselves. And I have seen in Jewish schools an acceptance and an embracing in, and I've also seen an othering. And I think if we really want to know that answer, we have to talk to the children.
Yeah.
And I also think that we have to be prepared to hear what they have to say and not shocked, not hurt, not surprised. And then I think from there, you know, maybe it is because I'm a psychologist, we then move to education and compassion. Maybe then, you know, the next generation or the generation after that,
Yeah.
may there be peace.
It's interesting. I went to a Jewish camp, Harriet, growing up, and when I moved to Philadelphia, I met a Reconstructionist rabbi there who had gone to my camp, and we were talking about camp one day, and this was in suburban New York, and I asked him, you know, why did you stop going to camp? And he said to me, that camp is sort of, he said that camp is one of the most racist places he ever encountered. Now he's a white Jew, and I was so blown away by this because I had no knowledge of that, obviously, right? Like, first of all, I wasn't all that perceptive, but here I am this way, and I had no knowledge of it. But it's like it was such a myth shatterer for me, because I had always thought of camp as that safe sort of place, and I realized in that moment, probably way too late, that it was safe for me. But just because it was safe for me did not necessarily mean that it was safe for other people. And so, I wonder why kids wouldn't have, similar to you guys, some similar to adults, some stories of really great acceptance and others where it's just that's horrific.
Right. And I want to make a point. I have seen some Jewish organizations say, you know, we have X amount of people of color as our employees. And then when I go in or when I explore that further, the people who are people of color are the secretaries, administrative assistants, the janitors, housekeepers, the security people. So many times in different spiritual organizations, I'll pass the other person of color and they're moving the table, right? They're setting up the food. And taking it back to we need to have more diversity in our communities. There's a message about that for our children, right? There's a message that the people of color are the service class. And if you are when you are applying for your grants, saying that you have X amount of people of color who are employed by you, but they are the people who are doing the service and not the services,
Yeah.
then that's something to explore.
Do you, and I guess this is a question to understand, the experience of a Jew of color. Do you experience prejudice from the Black community because you're Jewish and maybe not, Christian or whatever it might be?
Yeah, I'm so glad that's the question. I thought you were going to say, never mind. Yeah, I have had experiences where my Judaism is questioned among other Black people. Why are you doing this? Are you just trying to be white? And so it's a challenge, right? And when sometimes it feels like I'm not Black enough to be accepted by Blacks because I'm Jewish, and I'm not Jewish enough to be accepted by Jews because I'm Black. And lately, though, I just funnel all of those feelings into action, into being more open about who I am and my life, and that I am not Sammy Davis Jr. In the playback, someone said to me, I had no idea. It was a Black person said to me, I had no idea what Jews of color go through. I had no idea that one could choose to be Jewish. I thought you had to be born Jewish. I had another friend say to me, my goodness, with everything that you go through, why would you still be Jewish? And the answer is, I don't have a choice.
Yeah.
It's my soul.
Right.
And
as long as you converted to Judaism, you can convert back, right? Like,
right. No, it is my home. It is, it's my home. And so, yes, that is an experience. And hopefully the more Jews of color who are able to come forward, the more Jews of color who are able to have a voice, the more we can break down barriers and misunderstandings.
A lot of people are asking about Kohenet and that stuff. I'm actually not going to get to that in our questions because we have precious time. And that's not really our topic tonight. Please, 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 if you want more information about that, you can do that separately. But I did want to, somebody asked a question. Do you define yourself as an African-American Jew? And there was an interest in what religion you practiced as a child and how that sort of affects you, how that still affects you to this day.
Mm-hmm. So do I identify as an African-American Jew? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I also regularly say that, here's more color. I regularly say that I am a Black queer Jew, just to, really mix it up.
Check all the boxes.
Right, exactly. When I was 6, I told my mother we were attending a Christian Science group at that time, and I told my mom I didn't believe in organized religion, and she was very, very worried that the devil had gotten me. So she said, you figure out what you want to do. You figure out what church you want to go to, and I will go there with you. And in high school, she finally broke me down. And so we started attending a Catholic church, but that still didn't work for me personally. And what I have since come to understand is some of what I loved about Catholicism, like reading the same portion of the Bible across the entire world, so many other aspects were actually Judaic practices, as well as earth-based practices. And so I'm very lucky that that my mom did support me in exploring spirituality. I also am glad that when my mom went out to go to church on Sundays, my dad and I would stay home and watch like Elvis and Costello and Our Gang, and that I had this wonderful, beautiful time that was spiritual, connecting with my father. And I think what I learned is that human connection is spirituality. Human connection is God.
Yeah. So we're nearing our time, but Harriet, we've talked about so many serious things today. Why don't you tell me something fun about yourself? What do you like to do for fun?
What do I like to do for fun? I love to be by the ocean. If I can hear the ocean waves, I feel renewed. I love to cook for the people I love. I have learned to make vegan challah, and I've made it almost every week for 18 months now. It's getting to be pretty good. And my dog knows when it's Shabbat. And she will come downstairs and sit in the kitchen and wait for me to pull out the bowl and put the yeast in. So yeah, this is my little dog who has been getting bits of challah this whole
Very
hour.
well behaved. Oh, wait, I have one more question. Do you have time for one more, Harriet? Trillian,
Sure.
can we do one more?
Yeah, go for it. One more.
So, do you think that things have gotten worse for Jews of color in this political climate that we're in now? The country is so divided. We're seeing more instances of anti-Semitism in general. Is it your sense that it's worse now for Jews of color because of the general political climate?
That's a deep question, and that's one that I was hoping to avoid, but I'm going to speak my truth. I think that in the 80s, my parents used to tell me to be careful of white people because they said racism was real. And I said, racism is over. And they were right and I was wrong. And I think that in this current political climate, racism, anti-Semitism, hatred of others has almost been sanctioned, if not politically rewarded, which is sickening. So I think, yeah, if you're wearing a Star of David, you're at risk. If you're wearing black skin, brown skin, you're at risk. If you have a certain last name, yep, you're at risk. There are certain places where I make sure I'm no longer in after nightfall. And that's what my parents used to do in the 1950s and 60s. And there needs to be a change. And I think that all people who want that change need to start walking that talk. May we all be elevated. May we all feel healing. I mean, you asked me, like, may there be the commonality of humanity so that no one else has to die because of the color of their skin, who they love, who they pray to, or where they live. May that be so.
Yeah, hatred should just never be normalized. It should never become a part of normative behavior. And I worry. I know you probably didn't want to go there, but thank you for going there. Um, and I'll just say amen.
Amen.
Amen. Harriet, I just, I cannot thank you enough for this. As I said at the beginning, I'm so thankful to you. I will finish my piece of this by saying that the best part of this for me has been getting to know you. We didn't know each other that well as we began this. And I feel strongly that this is the beginning of our relationship. And that makes me, as much as anything about this, that really makes me excited. So, thank you, Harriet, for giving of yourself tonight, for being so open and willing to engage and connect with us. We're incredibly grateful.
Thank you for holding the space, and just thank you.
Oh, thank you both so much, and especially Harriet. Thank you so much. I too have found it just amazing to be working with you over the last few months, and yeah, so thank you. I also just wanted to jump on very quickly, just to mention to the audience, we're going to be dropping a few links in the chat right now. So there's going to be a link. Harriet, it was mentioned right at the beginning, Harriet's group that she's created, Baltimore Jews of Color Community Haruta. There's going to be a link to find out more about her group. We are also going to drop a link in there so you can access the recordings of the prior programs in this series. And also there'll be a link to this program probably in the middle of the week. So if you want to re-listen to moments or share with friends or family, especially over Thanksgiving, know that you can come back to this and share that. And then also we're going to drop in the chat again a link to email the team Hisakamuna if you're interested in purchasing a copy of the book that was mentioned earlier. So that was Judaism's A 21st Century Introduction to Jews and Jewish Identities by Aaron Tapper, who is actually going to be one of our speakers in the next program in this series. And then just the last thing I wanted to let folks know, those of you that are joining us through Zoom, as you exit the program today, you'll be directed to a survey. If you can take a moment to complete that survey for us, it is hugely helpful as we continue the planning process in this series. So with that, I guess I'd like to say thank you to everyone for joining us, but especially thank you to Dr. Wims and Rabbi Grunberg. Thank you so much.
Everybody.
Thank you.